The early May sky over Manhattan was impossibly blue. Wisps of clouds drifted lazily above the Whitestone Hotel, where Isabella Carter's wedding was taking place. She sat before the mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the veil. In the reflection, the 29-year-old woman staring back at her was both herself and someone else entirely. Her flawless face was meticulously painted, her sea-green eyes stripped of the freedom they once held. Everything about her was elegant, refined, perfect, except for the silence in those eyes. "You okay?" asked Lena, her maid of honor and best friend since college. "I'm fine," Isabella smiled, just a little nervous. On the vanity lay the wedding invitation, engraved in gold. Daniel Stone and Isabella Carter. A perfect match on paper, a brilliant lawyer and a respected veterinarian. Two people who looked ideal together. But ideal didn't mean in love. Outside, the band had begun to play Canon in D. Lavender from the rooftop garden drifted in through the window, blending with the faint scent of expensive perfume. Isabella took a deep breath and stood. Each step she took felt like the quiet cracking of something deep inside her. 8 weeks? Exactly 8 weeks since she'd found out she was pregnant, a secret no one else knew. And it wasn't Daniel's child. It couldn't be. They had chosen in vitro fertilization, using an anonymous donor Daniel's idea. The safest way to avoid any hereditary illness, he'd said. Isabella, who'd spent years working with biology and genetics, believed in science, in control, in order. But fate had other plans. When the double doors opened, every eye turned toward her. The bride in pure white lace stepped into the sunlight, heels clicking softly against marble. Daniel waited at the end of the aisle smiling, confident, a man who believed everything was exactly as it should be. Isabella smiled back, a beautiful smile, but hollow. She passed rows of guests' colleagues, Daniel's family, a few of her mother's friends. Each step marked by the slow beat of her heart, echoing through the music and soft wind. This union marks the beginning of a new chapter. The priest's calm voice rang out. If anyone objects, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. Then the roar of an engine. 3 black SUVs slid through the gates like predators. The garden erupted into chaos. Screams filled the air, flowers scattered. A man stepped out of the first car. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. His stride was cold, deliberate. No one dared to move. Sunlight glinted off his dark brown hair and the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He didn't need to speak. The atmosphere shifted the moment he appeared. "Who the hell is that?" someone gasped. Isabella froze. The man stopped a few feet from her, his gaze dark as volcanic rock locking on the stunned bride. When he spoke, his voice was low, gravelly, touched with a hint of Italian. Isabella Carter. The entire wedding fell silent. "You're carrying my child." A silence sharp as steel. Daniel turned sharply, his face draining of color. "What the hell is this?" Isabella stumbled back, heart pounding. "You're insane. I've never met you before." The man reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Riverside Fertility Clinic, February 12th. You were implanted with embryo 3487. So what? That sample was mine." The world tilted. A car door slammed. Men in black tactical gear fanned out with military precision, forming a protective line. "Christian Moretti," the man said evenly, "I'm here to take you before the others do." The others? Christian's gaze swept toward the perimeter. "You really haven't noticed someone's been watching you for weeks." Memories flashed the gray sedan in her mirror, footsteps in the dark, that uneasy feeling in the supermarket. She'd dismissed them as pre-wedding nerves. But then came the sound screeching tires, followed by gunfire. Panic exploded. Guests screamed, tables crashed, glass shattered. Daniel pulled Isabella backward just as a bullet shattered a nearby vase. Christian lunged forward, grabbing her, shielding her body with his own. "Come with me if you want to live," he growled, voice low and rough with smoke and metal. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice, Isabella." Another bullet hit the wall behind her. She screamed. Christian tightened his grip and pulled her into a run. Her white gown dragged through blood on the grass. Daniel's voice echoed somewhere behind her, swallowed by chaos and sirens. The SUV door slammed shut. The car sped away. Isabella gasped for breath, tears cutting through the fear on her face. "Who the hell are you?" The only one in that mess who doesn't want you dead, Christian replied, eyes fixed on the road. I don't believe you. That's fine. You won't have time to doubt me soon. Through the rear window, flames rose from the garden where she'd almost vowed her life away. She didn't know it yet, but that moment marked the end of her old world and the beginning of something she could never escape. The next morning, Isabella woke in a strange room. Dim light, stone walls, a window lined with iron bars elegant but unyielding. A mansion that felt more like a fortress. She rushed to the door locked. The window sealed. A knock. An older woman entered, silver-haired, composed, carrying a tray of food. Miss Carter, Mr. Moretti will see you when you're ready. He's not Mr. Moretti to me. He's a kidnapper. The woman merely smiled, bowed slightly, and left. On the table lay a newspaper. Front page headline. Massacre at Whitestone Hotel. Possible ties to Italian crime syndicates. Below it, a blurred photo of Daniel, being escorted by police. Isabella stared until the words blurred. Everything was gone except one question. Where am I, and why me? The door opened. Christian entered, light catching the steel of his watch. No suit this time, just a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a faint bandage at his wrist. Breakfast not to your liking, his tone calm, almost teasing. You're a monster. Maybe, but I'm the monster keeping you alive. Isabella met his eyes deep, cold, yet beneath that, something else, exhaustion, maybe even fear. You've been dragged into a war you don't understand, Christian said slowly. But trust me, they're coming. And when they do, you'll wish you were with me. He set another envelope on the table thicker, official looking. DNA test results. Printed at the bottom. Sample 3487, legal owner, Christian Moretti. Her breath caught. A chill crawled down her spine. Don't worry, he murmured, leaning close. I don't want anything from you except the child's safety. But to guarantee that. What she whispered? You're staying here. For how long? Until I'm sure no one dares touch you. She backed away, voice trembling. I don't believe you. Christian gave a faint, joyless smile. Belief doesn't change reality, and the reality is... He held her gaze. You're carrying a part of my blood. And in that instant, Isabella's world truly shattered. The story has only just begun. A wedding burned to ash. An unborn child carrying the secret of two worlds. And a man haunted by sins he can never escape. Want to know what happens when love collides with guilt? Listen to Part 2, The DNA Trap. Follow for more from Bloodbound, the most addictive mafia love story of the year. Morning at the Moretti Villa carried a strange light, gentle, warm, yet trapping. As if that sunlight were imprisoned along with her. Isabella sat by the window, looking out at the garden enclosed by high stone walls. Outside, men in black silently patrolled, guns at their hips. There was no unnecessary sound, no idle speech. Everything operated like a machine programmed with chilling precision. On the table, the tray of food had gone cold. Beside it lay the file Christian Moretti had left the night before. Papers, photographs, laboratory seals, everything genuine. Nothing suggested forgery. Still, reason screamed that this could not be true. She smoothed her fingers over the DNA report. The line genetic relationship 99.9% seemed to dance before her eyes, mocking every breath she took. A knock sounded at the door, slow and exact, the rhythm of someone who has never hurried. Christian entered, his composure irritably steady. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, his silver watch catching the light. I knocked 3 times. You didn't answer, he said, his voice low and dry. So I assumed you were still afraid. Isabella said nothing. She folded the file and pushed it toward him. If this is true, then why me? Why out of thousands of samples? Was it me? Christian paused. His eyes did not look away, but neither did they fully meet hers. I don't know, but I know who might have answers. Who? The director of Riverside, Dr. Arben Krensky, and unfortunately, he's gone into hiding. He pulled a photograph from his pocket and set it on the table, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, a faded smile. 3 weeks ago he left Boston. I have people tracing him. Isabella gave a bitter laugh. You monitor hospitals, clinics. Is there anything you don't control? You speak as if you're talking to an ordinary man, Christian replied calmly. I don't run a cafe. Isabella, I run a whole city. His words fell into the air, heavy and terrifyingly real. "So what am I in your city?" she asked quietly. "A mistake that needs to be fixed. Fixed by locking me up. By keeping you alive?" Christian stepped closer, stopping a few paces away. He placed a hand on the back of a chair, leaning in so the smell of leather and gunpowder mixed in the air. "I lost my mother to a kidnapping when I was 10, he said slowly, his voice like a confession. "They took her to force my father to sign a weapons transport deal. He refused. She was killed. Everything I do, even keeping you here, is to make sure that never happens again." Isabella shivered. Perhaps for the first time she heard a trace of humanity in his voice. Not the mafia, not power, but fear. "I don't need you to protect me. You are carrying my child. That is no longer a choice." She laughed, a brittle sound. "You talk as if I'm property." "No, but someone out there sees you as property." His gaze sharpened like a knife. "You don't understand. Isabella, this baby is a vulnerability many would kill to exploit." After that, the room slipped into silence. Only the slow ticking of a clock remained. Isabella looked away. "If I stay, what do I get besides these four walls?" "Freedom within limits." Christian answered promptly. "You can move around the compound, read, go into the garden. I won't stop you, as long as you don't try to run. And if I try, you'll force me to choose between tying you up or letting you die out there. I don't want to make that choice." The words were not a threat, yet they chilled her heart. She could not tell what in him was genuine and what was strategy, but that look, dark, weary, and oddly sincere, made it impossible to turn away. That afternoon, Isabella walked through the small southern garden. The grass was a vivid green, roses clipped into perfect shapes. Everything recalled a classical European garden, beautiful, yet soulless. The silver-haired housekeeper, Mrs. Russo, walked a few steps beside her, as silent as ever. "Is it always this quiet here?" Isabella asked. "Mr. Moretti likes to control everything, even sound." Mrs. Russo replied softly. "Silence helps him hear what others try to hide." "And you, why do you stay with a man like him?" "Because I owe him a life. He saved you." "No," she stopped, staring into the distance. "He saved my son." Isabella did not press further. Once again, she realized the people around Christian carried a loyalty that could not be easily explained, as if he led not only by fear, but by favors. Night fell and sleep would not come. Moonlight slipped through the curtains, thin and silver. In the stillness, everything felt unbearably real, the fear, the loneliness, and the faint pulse of life inside her. She placed a hand on her belly flat, but different now. Beneath the skin, something was growing, a life that had done nothing wrong. The door opened slightly. Christian entered without announcement, without permission. He carried a small box. "Sorry, I forgot this." "You planning to put another pair of handcuffs on me?" she snapped. He opened the box and set it on the table. Inside was a slender bracelet of white silver, set with a smoky gray stone. "This is not a shackle, it's a tracking device. If you leave the safe zone, I'll know." "You really don't understand boundaries." "You can throw it away, but if you're captured, I won't find you in time. Choose." Isabella looked at the bracelet. It was pretty, simple, almost delicate. She didn't want to wear it, but she didn't want to die either. She held out her hand. Christian clasped it with a light touch, fastening the bracelet around her wrist. His fingers brushed her skin warm, but with a tremor in them. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because I have lost too much." The answer was so honest she had no reply. Days passed. Isabella began to observe Christian more not out of curiosity, but survival instinct. She noticed he lived by near-mechanical routines: early work, closed meetings with subordinates, afternoon target practice, evenings with books or classical music. No alcohol, no women, no laughter. A man living in a cage of his own making, convinced it was freedom. One night, she accidentally saw him in the sitting room, half his face in shadow. He held an old photograph, a young woman smiling by the sea, perhaps his mother. He didn't realize she was at the door. His look then was raw pain, stripped of any iron armor. She turned away silently, something stirring inside her. 2 days later, Christian summoned her to the library. On the table lay a new dossier: medical records, hospital files, and satellite images. "My people found a leaked biomedical database from Riverside. Not just you. Dozens of women had samples switched." Isabella gripped her hands. Why, she whispered. Money and power. They pick donors with rare genes, the children of lords, merchants, or mafia. He looked up. The baby inside you is not an accident. It is part of a transaction. Isabella felt her head spin. Are you saying I'm the result of trafficking? No, I'm saying you are the consequence of a crime. Silence stretched between them. So what will you do now? She asked hoarsely. I will erase those responsible before they come for you. You will kill them, if necessary. And me. Where do I stand in your revenge? At the center, he replied. You are the only evidence. Isabella stared at him for a long time. In those deep eyes, she saw something else, not only power, but a faith strange, dangerous, almost desperate. She whispered, barely audible. If this child is truly part of your blood, then I have no way back, do I? Christian did not answer immediately. He only looked at her, a long look, then replied in a single, curt sentence. From the moment they chose you, there was no way back. Outside, rain began to fall. Drops beat against the window like a quickened pulse. Isabella sat still, hand touching the bracelet that gleamed on her wrist. It was cold, but she didn't take it off. Not from fear, but because, deep inside, she felt something changing. Not only in her body, but in what she believed. Somewhere between shadow and truth, a thin thread had been tied between kidnapper and captive, between hatred and something she had not yet dared to name. Rain fell over the outskirts of New York like a thin curtain, separating the world inside the Moretti estate from everything beyond. Droplets slid down the window pane, reflecting Isabella's face, pale, tired, but changed. No longer the panic of a captive, but a new kind of calm cold, lucid, patient. 3 days had passed since she discovered she was just one among dozens of women whose embryos had been switched. Each night she still woke in a start, hearing echoes of sirens, gunfire, and the image of that man in the blaze, cold as steel, yet carrying a pain buried deep beneath. That morning, Mrs. Russo entered with a tray of food and a white envelope. From Mr. Moretti, he said you should read it. Isabella opened it to find a document printed in English and Italian. The title read, Witness and Biological Asset Protection Agreement. He must be joking, she muttered. I'm a person, not an asset. I only follow orders. Mrs. Russo replied softly, bowing before she left. The contract contained 3 clauses. 1. Isabella Carter would remain under the protection of Moretti Group within a designated safe zone until the Riverside case was resolved. 2. All information regarding the embryo switching operation must remain strictly confidential. 3. In the event of exposure, decisions regarding relocation or concealment would rest solely with Christian Moretti. At the bottom, his signature bold, slanted, commanding. She read it again and again. Every line felt like an invisible shackle. Finally, she folded the paper, laid it on the table, and murmured under her breath. If he thinks he can buy my silence, he still doesn't understand me. By noon, the rain had stopped. Isabella decided to walk to the back of the property. The stone path led toward an old storage house, its walls draped in ivy. A guard in black stood at the entrance, but when he saw her, he only inclined his head, saying nothing. She moved slowly, eyes scanning every detail, the discreet cameras hidden in the branches, the electronic locks, the patches of freshly turned soil near the fence. That instinct of someone used to the scent of hidden rot, honed from years in clinics, began to stir. The warehouse door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The air inside was damp, metallic. Faint light filtered through the cracks. Wooden crates were stacked high, each marked with medical codes: Ivivmedic, biostorage, cold vials. Her heartbeat quickened. She pried open one crate. Inside, not weapons, but medical files, hundreds of them, thick folders with women's faces attached. Some familiar, some she remembered from Riverside's patient list. She flipped one open. Subject 06, Maria Alvarez, age 32. Procedure embryo implantation, date 11/12. Final entry status deceased. Her throat tightened. She kept reading Subject 07, Subject 08. Every one of them ended with deceased. By the 10th file, her hands trembled. Printed in bold, Subject 10, Isabella Carter. Her own photo, Dart Arben-Krinsky's signature. Last note, status active. Asset secured by CM. Asset, she whispered. Footsteps behind her. Christian stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes shadowed. "I figured you'd find this place," he said, voice calm, almost sad. "I didn't need to figure it out to know you were hiding something. I hid it to protect you. By labeling me like a lab rat." He was silent for a beat. "If I hadn't retrieved those records, you'd be dead like the others." "You say that like you're my savior." "No," Christian said quietly, stepping closer. "I'm just the one who came too late." Isabella stared at him, fear and disgust warring in her eyes. "So what now?" "Burn it all and erase the evidence." "No, keep it. It's proof." "Proof for whom? The FBI or your empire?" He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched down, picking up a fallen folder and smoothing its edges. "I used to think silence would end things, but people like these, they never stop." His voice dropped lower, heavy as the air in the warehouse. "My father once said, the truth is only terrifying when people aren't ready to hear it. I understood that the moment I saw your name on the list." Isabella shivered. Around her were the ghosts of women whose stories had ended in darkness, and she, the only one left alive. "Why am I still alive?" Christian looked up slowly. "Because they wanted to see how the child would turn out." The answer hit her like a blow. The air thickened. "You knew that and still did nothing. I killed the supervisor assigned to monitor you before he could report back. From that moment on, you weren't an experiment. You were human, and I chose to keep you alive." She wanted to believe him, but reason wouldn't let her. "Keep me alive? For what?" "To make amends," he said quietly. Evening fell. They stood in the still warehouse, surrounded by dust and the whisper of old paper. A breeze swept through, scattering the files like restless spirits. Christian drew a folding knife from his pocket, slicing through the seal of the last crate. Inside lay an old genetic data recorder, worn but intact. "This is what they used to track the embryos. Each one opens only with the donor's code mine." "And what will you do with it?" "Destroy it." Isabella watched as he lit a match and held it to the device in a metal tray. Blue flames rose, reflecting in his eyes cold, unflinching. "Aren't you afraid of losing evidence?" she asked. "Some things," he said, "only turn you into a monster if you keep them." They didn't speak afterward. Isabella returned to her room, bathed, and stepped onto the balcony in a thin robe. The night had deepened, the rain was gone, leaving the air damp and clean. She sat with a cup of tea, gazing toward the garden where darkness met horizon. There she saw Christian standing beneath a maple tree, motionless, his shadow long against the ground. She didn't know why she watched so long. Maybe because, for the first time, he didn't look like power, just a man holding on to something already lost. Late that night, a knock came. Christian entered, no suit this time, only a dark sweater. He carried another folder. "They found traces of Dr. Arbin Krensky in Montreal. We may need to move soon." She asked, startled. "You think I'd let you go alone?" Isabella stared at him. He wasn't joking. "Don't you see how wrong this is? You lock me up, then drag me wherever you want. I have no say." "You have a choice," he said softly, "just not safety." He laid the file on the table. "If you wish, I'll let you go. But look at this first." Inside were photos of the women from the warehouse, one by one. In the corner, a blurred picture of Isabella at the clinic, her eyes bright, innocent, unaware that the world was already sharpening its knives. "You're the only one left alive," he said quietly. "They won't let that stand." His voice sank lower. "If you leave, they'll kill you or the child." Isabella was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "If I stay, I want a deal." "A deal," he echoed. "I don't want to be your hostage. I want to be your partner." He studied her, then nodded slowly. "Name your terms." "I help you find Krensky. In exchange, I get my freedom when this is over. And I'm supposed to trust you not to betray me." "You don't trust anyone, Moretti, but if you want me to trust you, start here." He hesitated, then extended his hand. Deal accepted. Isabella took it. For a brief moment, she could feel his pulse steady, strong, yet trembling faintly. Neither spoke, but both knew this was no longer captor and captive. It was a survival deal where the line between trust and betrayal was as thin as a breath. That night, after he left, Isabella sat for a long time. The rain began again. She opened her old notebook and wrote a single line. "Nothing is more dangerous than trusting the one who once made you afraid." Then she closed it. placing it by the window where lightning flickered across the glass, illuminating the reflection of a woman learning to survive between love, guilt, and truth. Dusk had fallen when the SUV rolled away from the Moretti estate, winding along the mountain road. The early autumn wind swept through the pines, carrying the scent of sap, gasoline, and metal. Isabella sat in the back seat, eyes fixed on the blur of trees outside. In the distance, the city shimmered like a strip of unreachable light, familiar, yet belonging to another world. She had signed the agreement. No longer a hostage, but a partner, at least on paper. Christian sat in the front beside his trusted bodyguard, silent as always. The dashboard light carved sharp shadows across his face, making it unreadable. "Where are we going?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Montreal," he replied curtly. "My men found traces of Arben Krensky. If we're lucky, he hasn't left Canada yet." "Lucky," she scoffed softly. "I didn't think you believed in luck." "I don't," Christian said, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "I believe in fear. It makes people make mistakes, and that's when I find them." His words sent a shiver down her spine. To Christian, fear wasn't an enemy, it was a weapon. They stopped at the border. From a distance, snow had begun to fall, the season's first flakes, fragile and mercilessly pure. They rented a small cabin by Lake St. Louis as a temporary hideout, an old wooden house with a fireplace, the smell of burnt pine, and the wind whistling through its cracks. No luxury, no guards, only the rawness of silence. Isabella stood by the frosted window, gazing at the half-frozen lake. "You're sure he'll come?" "Positive," Christian said, eyes still on the map spread across the table. "Men like Krensky can't hide forever. He's used to being paid to stay quiet. When the money runs out, he'll look for someone new to buy his silence." "And that someone is you." "No," Christian's mouth curved into a thin, cold smile. "It's the one who wants you dead." Night fell. The firelight flickered across the walls, warm in color, uneasy in feel. Isabella sat by the hearth, a cup of tea in her hands. Christian sat opposite, cleaning his pistol piece by piece with methodical care. "How long have you been doing that?" "Since I was 16, he said without looking up. "Killing people." "Protecting myself," he corrected. "And somewhere along the line, I became the man others fear." She said nothing. There was something in his tone, exhaustion disguised as composure. A kind of weariness buried beneath all that power. "Aren't you afraid? Living like this, always watching, always ready to kill or be killed." "Of course," he said, eyes glinting in the firelight. "But fear is the only thing that reminds me I'm still alive." She set the cup down, studying him quietly. "You're not a monster, Christian." He gave a hollow laugh. "Then what am I?" "A man who's forgotten how to believe he deserves forgiveness." That made him pause. For a few seconds, he said nothing, just looked at her, as if she'd touched the one part of him that still hurt. Late that night, she woke to the sound of wind tearing through the walls. Snow was falling hard. From the other room came faint voices, one of them his. Isabella stepped into the dimly lit hallway. Christian was speaking in Italian, low and tense. "I told you to stay quiet. If Krensky comes near, do not engage." A pause, then his voice again clipped. "No, I'm not leaving. He's here." She froze. "Here." When he hung up, she whispered from the doorway. "He's close. He's at the western cabins, alone. I'm going after him." "You're going to kill him." "Depends on whether he talks." "I'm coming with you." He turned that look again, dark, sharp, but edged with concern. "No, too dangerous." "I'm not a glass figurine to lock away. This is my fight too, Christian." He hesitated, then finally nodded. "Fine, but you stay silent. You don't interfere." The path to the cabin was silent, buried in snow. Moonlight washed the ground in a pale, dreamlike glow. The old door creaked open. Inside, the stench of whiskey and stale smoke. A gray-haired man sat slumped in a chair, half-empty bottle on the table. His eyes flickered with recognition, and a crooked grin split his face. "I knew you'd come. You should know you're running out of time." "Arben," Christian said evenly, "they'll find you soon." "What do I care? I just followed the contract. She wanted a perfect child. I only switched the samples." Isabella's breath caught. She Christian pressed. "Yes, a woman, blonde, American accent. Name, I think it was Victoria." Isabella stiffened. Victoria Daniels' former assistant, the one who'd recommended the clinic. Christian noticed her reaction, his expression darkening. You know her. She used to be my friend, Isabella whispered. Someone I trusted. Arbin laughed hoarsely. Trust is the rarest luxury in this world. He stood slowly, moving toward the table. I just want to leave. I've backed up everything. If you kill me, it goes straight to the press. Christian's face didn't change. He set his gun on the table. I don't need to kill you. I just want to know who's behind Victoria. Arbin hesitated, eyes flicking toward the window too fast, too obvious. Christian moved instantly, pulling Isabella behind him. A flash, shattering glass. A gunshot tore through the room. Christian staggered, blood splattering onto the snow. It happened in seconds. Isabella screamed, dropping beside him. Christian. Where are you hit? Shoulder? He gritted out, voice raw, not deep. Outside. An engine roared and faded into the trees. Arbin was gone. She tore a strip from her sleeve, pressing it to the wound. Warm blood soaked her palms. Christian's hand caught her wrist. Don't be scared. I'm not, just don't close your eyes. He let out a weak chuckle, pale lips curling. You give orders well. Shut up. Her hands trembled, but she wrapped the bandage tight. When the bleeding slowed, she finally exhaled, tears spilling as relief and fear collided. You're insane, you know that. Takes one to follow me here, he murmured. Morning came. Christian awoke in the small cabin, his shoulder bandaged. Isabella sat by the bed, head resting against the wall, fast asleep from exhaustion. Pale sunlight filtered through the curtains, softening her face so calm, so alive. It made him want to forget the rest of the world. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was fleeting, but something inside him tightened sharp, unfamiliar. She stirred, catching his gaze. You shouldn't move, she said softly. You still haven't answered me, he rasped. About what? Why you came back for me instead of running? Her eyes glimmered in the morning light. Because I've seen enough people die. The words fell between them quiet, yet heavy as confession. Outside, the snow kept falling. They sat in silence, listening to the wind hum through the cabin walls. Christian closed his eyes and murmured, I used to think saving someone was weakness, but today, you made me doubt that. Isabella said nothing. In the muted light, blood, breath, and warmth intertwined, fragile proof they were both still alive. And in that fragile space between life and death, something shifted. Not pity, not obligation, but a fragile thread had begun to form, one both of them were too afraid to name. The snowstorm had passed, leaving streaks of crystal light gliding across the surface of Lake St. Louis. Isabella woke to the stillness of morning. The small wooden cabin still carried the chill from the night before. In that quiet, only the soft whistle of wind through the cracks and Christian's even breathing from the next bed could be heard. He was awake but still weak. The bandage on his shoulder had been changed, the wound beginning to dry, the skin around the stitches dark and bruised. She sat beside him, carefully checking the medicine. Her hands, once familiar only with stethoscopes and the soft fur of animals, had now learned the texture of blood and human pain. You're remarkably patient for someone tending to a man who never listens, Christian murmured, voice low and hoarse. I just don't want to be accused of killing a mafia boss with gauze and cotton, she replied, keeping her tone flat. He gave a quiet laugh rare in his world of orders and silence. It was brief, but it warmed the space between them. You're shaking. I'm not. You are. I'm just cold. She stood to leave, but his hand caught hers, a light touch, yet enough to stop her entirely. In that single moment, something unspoken passed between them, fragile, dangerous, and real. That afternoon, with sunlight glittering across the melting snow, Christian asked her to walk with him. I need air, he said, his voice stronger now. Your shoulder. I've survived worse, trust me. A little cold won't kill me. She helped him with his coat, and together they stepped outside. The lakeside path shimmered silver. The world hushed and glacial, so still they could almost hear their own heartbeats. Christian paused, staring out over the frozen water. When I was a boy, I wished I'd been born somewhere without snow. In Italy, winter is cold. Yes, but never this white. I hate being surrounded by something so beautiful yet so lifeless. Isabella looked at him quietly. Maybe you hate it because it reminds you of yourself. He turned, his eyes dark and endless. You think I'm lifeless? No, she said softly. I think you're learning how to feel again. He said nothing, but something in his gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. That evening, she made a simple dinner vegetable soup, toasted bread, and a bit of cheese. Christian sat at the table, watching her slice the vegetables with slow, careful movements. The lamp above cast a soft halo of light around her hair. What did you dream about? He asked, before all of this happened. Dream, she smiled faintly. I wanted to open an animal rescue center. Somewhere quiet outside the city with sunlight, a garden. I'd take in abandoned animals, care for them until they healed. And now? Now, she said softly, I just want to live long enough to see the sunrise. It was half a joke, half truth, but he didn't smile. When this is over, I'll help you build that place. You will. I can buy a whole street, Isabella. One shelter isn't much. She gave a faint, tired smile. You really think money can buy peace? No, he said, voice low, but it can buy the chance to start over. She didn't answer. For the first time, she sensed he wasn't hiding behind words, he was revealing them. Night fell. Christian read in the dim light, papers spread before him. Isabella lay on the couch, listening to the crackle of fire and the soft shuffle of pages. After a while, she asked quietly, You've never had anyone, have you, a woman, I mean... He looked up, meeting her eyes. Once, but no one ever stayed long. Because you're dangerous. Because I never learned how to love, right? She smiled faintly. No one ever really does. You're different. Me. You make people believe in you even when everything else falls apart. Isabella tilted her head, her eyes warm but distant. You're wrong. Christian, trust is something I lost a long time ago. The next morning, they left the cabin for a small clinic Christian had arranged in secret. Dr. O'Neill, he introduced, someone I trust. He'll check on the pregnancy. The room was small, smelling faintly of disinfectant. Isabella lay back on the exam bed, coat lifted, the skin of her abdomen rising gently with each breath. Christian stood nearby, hands buried in his coat pockets, calm on the surface, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. For several quiet minutes, only the hum of the machine filled the air. Then the doctor smiled. Everything looks perfect. Strong heartbeat, about 11 weeks. She's doing very well. Christian leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen where a small, blinking light pulsed steadily. Isabella held her breath. A heartbeat. Faint yet clear, a tiny drum echoing in her chest. Is that, she whispered? Your baby's heart, the doctor said kindly. She turned to Christian. He stood frozen, gaze locked on the flickering light. His lips parted slightly, his expression softening in a way she had never seen. Do you hear it? Yes, he said hoarsely. I hear it. They fell silent. Only that sound remained steady, fragile, defiant proof of life in the darkness surrounding them. When they left the clinic, most of the snow had melted. The streets glistened under a silvery sky. Christian walked slowly, hands in his coat pockets. When Isabella slipped on the wet pavement, his reflexes caught her instantly. His hand closed around hers, firm, grounding. No words, only a brief silence, warm, human. Have you ever thought about being a father? She asked as they stopped by a cafe. He hesitated. I don't think I'd be good at it. No one's born good at it. We just learn. He looked down at their joined hands. Everything I touch, I ruin. Maybe you just need to learn how to touch more gently. She smiled and stepped inside, leaving him standing on the foggy street, watching her for a long time. That night, they returned to the cabin. Christian sat by the fire, the glow painting his face in amber. For the first time, Isabella saw no darkness in his eyes, only something raw, like yearning. When I heard that heartbeat, he said quietly, I realized I've never really lived. You're alive, aren't you? No, I've only existed. Living means having something worth protecting. She didn't reply. The fire flickered between them, its light dancing in her eyes. Christian leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers, slow, deliberate. The distance between them shrank to a breath. Then he stopped, whispering, I don't want to scare you. You can't, she murmured, not anymore. The firelight touched their skin hot, but tender. Outside, the snow had stopped. Above, a thin crescent moon curved like a wound just beginning to heal. That night, in the small cabin deep in the woods, something changed forever between them. Not a promise, not a pact, but a new heartbeat, one that pulsed not only in the unborn child's body, but within two broken hearts learning how to beat again. Early morning in Montreal was veiled in mist, the buildings coated in thin layers of ice that caught the first rays of sunlight. Isabella opened the window, drawing in the sharp, cold air, feeling the chill seep through her skin. Beneath her thick coat, she placed a hand over her belly where a small, steady heartbeat pulsed quietly, persistently. Christian was still asleep on the sofa, a thin blanket draped loosely over his shoulders. He never truly slept, always half alert, as if his mind refused to surrender to rest. She watched him in silence. Without the steel mask of a mafia boss, he looked different. Softer, human, and dangerous in a new way, the kind that made you want to believe. Over breakfast, Christian scrolled through the news on his phone, his voice low and even. The police found Arben Krensky's car near the Ontario border. No body, but there was blood. You think he's dead? Isabella asked. No, he's running, and the one helping him works for Victoria. The name alone froze the air. Victoria, the woman who once smiled across a cafe table, saying women should help women. The one who had led her to that clinic, the one that changed everything. Now, even the thought of her sent a chill down Isabella's spine. You knew her? No, but I know her type: brilliant, ambitious, and willing to burn the world for what she wants. He lifted his gaze, sharp as a blade. She'll come for you. Isabella pressed her lips together. Because of the baby. Because of what it represents. You don't understand. Isabella. The Riverside Project wasn't just science, it was a weapon. A child engineered from selective genes could be the most valuable asset or the deadliest threat to those behind it. Her pulse quickened. Fear came back, but this time it was mixed with something else: truth. It terrified her, yet it cleared her vision. So I'm the eye of the storm. No, Christian said quietly. We are. That afternoon, he took her to what he called the safe data vault. A deserted warehouse in an abandoned industrial zone rusted on the outside. But inside lay a secret network: screens, servers, cameras, and satellite maps. Old photographs covered the walls. Doctors, investors, political figures. At the center was a portrait of Victoria, bright smile, cold eyes. Underneath, scribbled words: Riverside Project, source code Aegis. Isabella brushed her fingers across the photo. Aegis, what does it mean? A shield, Christian explained. In Greek mythology, it protected Zeus, but in the wrong hands. It slaughtered thousands. You think they created this project to protect people? No, to control them. He turned toward her, voice lowering. And now they want back what they believe is theirs, you? That night, they returned to the cabin by the lake. Isabella sat before the mirror, brushing her hair, her reflection glowing under the soft amber light. From the doorway, Christian entered, his coat still damp from the mist. He set his gun on the table and said quietly, We have 3 days before they find us. I'll take you to New York, somewhere safer. She looked up, her voice trembling slightly. Safer, or just another cage? He didn't answer. She turned to face him fully, her eyes steady. I don't want to keep running. I want this to end. Not everything ends with justice. Isabella. Some things only stop when the blood does. Then how much more blood are you willing to spill? She asked, her voice shaking but firm. Christian studied her for a long moment, then said slowly, As much as it takes until you and the baby are no longer targets. Night fell. Wind howled outside. In the small house, Isabella couldn't sleep. She stepped out onto the porch. The snow had melted, leaving only a thin chill in the air. A few minutes later, Christian joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and leaned against the railing beside her. I used to hate winter, he said softly, but since I met you, it's not so bad anymore. She smiled faintly. You keep saying things that are hard to believe. That's because I rarely say anything true, he replied. But this is... Silence settled between them, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Isabella turned the cup in her hands. If I disappeared one day, would you look for me? He turned to her, his gaze cutting through the dark. I'd burn the world to find you. Her throat tightened, not from the force of his words, but from their quiet, unguarded truth. The next morning, they left Montreal. The car glided through gray forests, snow lining the roadside. Christian drove, focused, one hand never far from his gun. Halfway down the route, They hit a fake checkpoint men in police uniforms moving with military precision. One of them stepped forward, smirking. "Mr. Moretti, hand her over, and you walk away." Christian didn't reply. 3 seconds later, he pulled the trigger. Gunfire cracked through the forest. The car swerved violently, tires skidding over ice. Isabella clutched her stomach, heart pounding, while Christian remained calm, eyes sharp, movements precise. They escaped, but the windshield shattered, one tire blown, smoke rising from the hood. He grabbed her hand, pulling her out and toward the trees. They ran until they collapsed behind a fallen trunk. "Are you hit?" she gasped. "No, I'm fine." They both panted, breath mingling in the cold air. She realized his hand was still gripping hers firm, warm, protective. "I told you," he whispered, voice rough and steady. "No one touches you." They hid in an abandoned farmhouse near the border. That night, when Isabella woke from a nightmare, Christian was sitting beside her, his eyes clouded with exhaustion. "You never sleep deeply, do you?" she murmured. "No one in my world is allowed to," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because the moment you close your eyes, everything you love disappears." He looked at her then. "You shouldn't be here, Isabella. You belong to the light. I'm the dark, and darkness can't hold the light for long." She shook her head. "No one is born darkness. Christian, you just forgot how to see the light." Her words stopped him. And in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in years' faith. Not in him, but in the man he could still be. Morning? She woke to sunlight spilling through the cracked window. Christian stood by the door, golden light tracing the line of his shoulders. She approached quietly. "You haven't eaten." "Not hungry." "You should try living like a normal person, at least while you still can." He turned, eyes distant but calm. "If there's another life after this, I'd live it differently. Maybe I'd be a doctor, or sell books. And this life, I just want to stay alive long enough to protect the only thing that still makes me feel human." She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. He wasn't talking about power or survival. He was talking about her. Outside, the sun climbed higher, glinting on the melting ice. Christian turned away, putting on his coat ready for another journey into the shadows. Isabella remained by the window, hand resting on her belly, a faint smile touching her lips. Because for the first time, standing between light and guilt, she believed, even in darkness, someone still knows how to hold on to the dawn. A week later, rain fell over New York. The skyscrapers disappeared into the mist, car lights reflecting gold across the soaked streets. The black SUV stopped in front of the Whitestone Tower headquarters of a powerful financial conglomerate, and one of Christian's oldest hidden investments. He stepped out, scanning the area. 2 guards followed close behind, but Isabella could still see the tension beneath his calm. Since their return to the U.S., he hadn't slept much. Routes, meeting points, contacts, everything changed daily, as if a single mistake could make their world collapse. The meeting room on the 32nd floor opened. There were no sleek executives, only 4 men in black suits, their eyes sharp and expressionless. The oldest one, gray-haired, spoke slowly. "We've heard you're holding something we want, Mr. Moretti." Christian sat down and removed his gloves. "If what you want is a human life, I'm not selling." The man smiled faintly, though his eyes remained hollow. "You can keep her, but the Riverside data must be returned. That's the only condition under which both sides survive." "Riverside doesn't exist anymore," Christian said, his tone low and rough. "I burned everything." "You only burned the copies. The original data is still with one person, Victoria Hale, and you know she won't stop." Her name cut through the room like a blade. From outside the glass wall, Isabella heard everything. She wasn't allowed in, but every word struck her chest like shards of an old fear reborn. Night fell. The temporary apartment in Brooklyn lay in near darkness. Christian sat by the window, cigarette in hand, the dying ember painting his face with quiet exhaustion. Isabella approached, laying a hand on his shoulder. "What do they want from you?" "Not from me," he said without turning. "From you. The data again. They believe something happened during the implantation, something even they couldn't control." "What kind of something?" "A genetic mutation. It could be a flaw or a breakthrough." Silence. She didn't fully understand the science, but she understood the truth they didn't see her as human. She was a result, A living error, a proof both the underworld and the system wanted to own. What will you do? I'll find Victoria before they do. And kill her. If I have to. Christian, she said softly, if you keep killing everyone who threatens you, one day you'll have no one left. He turned toward her. For the first time, his eyes wavered a quiet fracture in the armor. I'm used to that. No, she whispered. You're not. You've just learned to survive it. 2 days later, they left New York, heading south toward rural Virginia. An anonymous source had sent Christian a blurry video of Victoria stepping out of an underground lab with several armed men. She's still operating, Christian muttered, eyes on the screen. And she knows we're alive, Isabella said. Rain drummed on the windshield as they drove. Christian said nothing, his jaw clenched, knuckles white against the steering wheel. She watched him, the quiet war behind his eyes. Are you afraid? She asked softly. No, I'm afraid of losing what I'm trying to protect. Me. You and the baby. She turned to the gray sky outside, raindrops racing down the glass. You can't carry everything alone. I have to, he said quietly, because I'm the reason it started. They arrived at an abandoned mansion deep in the pine forest, once owned by an old friend of Christian's. Long gone now. At night, the wind creaked through the cracked roof and broken shutters. Isabella sat by the fireplace, writing in her notebook something she'd done every night, a ritual to keep her sanity. When Christian entered, his eyes were tired, his face drawn. You're not sleeping. Can't. Thinking about Victoria. Thinking about the people I lost because I trusted the wrong ones. He sat beside her. The firelight glowed against a faint scar on his wrist. She reached out and touched it gently. How long ago? Years. I was captured and tortured, early in my rise. I killed them all afterward, but this one never faded. Maybe it stayed to remind you you're still human. And you, he asked quietly, what reminds you you're still alive? She smiled faintly, resting her hand over her belly. This? He looked at her hand, and something in his eyes softened. It's the only thing in this world I never want to hurt. The next morning, Christian left to meet a contact. Alone in the house, Isabella heard a faint noise from the basement. Hesitant, she went down. The old door creaked open. Inside rows of metal crates, half covered by tarps. One of them was slightly open. She pulled the tarp away and froze. Inside were Riverside files intact. DNA records, donor names, photographs. Her photograph. And at the bottom, a signature Christian Moretti. Her body went cold. He had told her he destroyed everything. Yet here it was proof he'd kept it. Hidden it. From her. From everyone. That evening, when Christian returned, she was waiting. The file lay open on the table. He stopped in the doorway, eyes dark. Isabella. You lied to me. Let me explain. You said you destroyed everything, but you kept this. Why? Her voice wasn't loud, but every word cut like glass. Christian's shoulders dropped, his eyes heavy. Because I couldn't lose you. So you kept me with a lie. Not to control you, to protect you. If I didn't have a copy, they'd never stop hunting you. This made them think you still had value. And it kept you alive. Don't you see, she cried, tears rising. By keeping secrets, by trying to control everything, you're making it impossible for me to trust you. A long silence fell. When Christian finally spoke, his voice was raw, a confession more than a defense. I don't know how to love without making someone afraid. Isabella. She stepped back, trembling. Maybe that's because you think love means holding on. But sometimes, love means letting go. That night, she couldn't sleep. She left the house, walking into the forest. Snow had begun to fall again, melting on her hair and shoulders. Behind her, Christian stood at the door, watching her silhouette small, silent, like an accusation carved into the dark. He followed, slowly, stopping a few feet away. Are you leaving? I don't know. I just need to breathe. To remember that I'm still me, not a part of your plan. He said nothing. Snow gathered on his hair, on his lashes. His eyes full of pain made her look away. What if I said I'm sorry? An apology won't fix the crack. Christian, she whispered. But maybe it's where the light gets in. She turned and walked into the night. He didn't stop her. He just stood there, motionless, until her figure dissolved into the falling snow. The wind howled through the forest. Isabella walked until she reached the faint glow of a distant highway. She knew going back was a choice. But this time, she had to choose for herself. Behind her, Christian stood alone beneath the snow, staring into the darkness where she had vanished. In his hand, the Riverside file was crumpled, wet with melted snow. The name Subject 10, Isabella Carter, bled into unreadable ink. He whispered to the silence, maybe to himself, maybe to her. If loving you is wrong, then I never want to be right again. 3 days after leaving the mansion in the forest, Isabella arrived in Washington. She rented a small room in Georgetown, where rain-soaked cobblestone streets smelled faintly of roasted coffee and morning mist. No bodyguards, no Christian, no gunfire, no cameras. Just her and the silence she once thought she longed for. But freedom, she discovered, could be achingly lonely. On her first morning, she stood by the window watching the rush of people below. Her belly had begun to show. Beneath her coat, that curve was proof that no matter how chaotic the world outside became, something within her was still alive. She opened her notebook and wrote for the first time in days. Freedom doesn't mean not being afraid. Freedom means being afraid and walking forward anyway. Each word trembled slightly, as if her heart were learning how to beat again after breaking apart. She thought of Christian, of the way he would look at her without speaking, of the rasp in his voice when he spoke about his fear of losing what he loved. But alongside the ache came anger. He had lied to her, and love built on lies could never take root. That evening, as she washed the dishes, a knock came at the door. A tall woman stood in the hallway, short hair, sharp eyes, calm demeanor. Are you Isabella Carter? Yes. I'm Special Agent Laura Pierce, FBI. Isabella froze. Laura showed her badge and spoke quickly. We're investigating a case connected to the Riverside Project, and to Mr. Christian Moretti. Isabella hesitated, then opened the door. Laura stepped inside, placing a thick file on the table. Inside were photographs of burned laboratory, Arbin Krensky's corpse, and Christian standing at the scene, eyes like steel. He said he wanted to protect you, but what we've found suggests otherwise. He didn't kill Krensky? No one said he did, but he was there, and we need to know why. I'm not saying anything, Isabella murmured. I've lived in enough lies. I won't be another pawn for anyone. Laura studied her, then softened. I understand. But if you really want this to end, Isabella, you'll need the truth, even if it breaks you. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. The file Laura had left lay open on the table. A photograph slipped free Christian in a black suit, shaking hands with Victoria Hale. They smiled. It looked genuine. Too genuine. Her fingers tightened around the photo as her blood turned cold. Was everything the rescue, the protection, the love, just another move in his game? By morning, she decided she needed answers. Laura had left her an address, a potential witness, once part of Victoria's private security team. It led her to an old bar by the Potomac River. Inside, the light was dim, the air heavy with smoke. A man sat in the corner, eyes shadowed, half-empty bottle at his side. You're Carter. Yes? You shouldn't be here. They're looking for you. I just need to know one thing, Christian Moretti. Who does he really work for? The man gave a dry laugh and poured another drink. Work for? He used to work for Victoria, years ago. Then he turned on her, stole data, destroyed her lab, disappeared. You think it's coincidence your name's on that list as Subject 10? He chose you. Chose. He tried to save you from being implanted, but the Riverside system misread the code. You carrying that child, it wasn't planned. Not by them, not by him. She went still. So this baby? It's an accident or a miracle. Depends on how you look at it. But it's the variable no one saw coming. The man gripped her shoulder, voice trembling. If I were you, I'd run. Victoria's coming back, and she never leaves behind what's hers. On her way home, the rain returned heavy, relentless. Isabella crossed the iron bridge, water splashing against her boots, wind tearing through her hair. She had heard the truth, or a version of it, yet she no longer knew what to believe. Each step felt heavier. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from one haunting question. Christian, were you ever real with me? When she reached the apartment, the door was already open. The lights were off. The faint scent of gunpowder lingered in the air. Before she could react, a voice spoke from behind her. You should really be more careful, Isabella. She turned.
Victoria Hale stood there beautiful, cold, flawless, like a statue of glass.
Her blonde hair gleamed under the dim light. Her gray eyes shimmered with cruel calm. It's been a while. You've been following me. I've been following the baby. It doesn't belong to you. You're insane. Perhaps, Victoria smiled. But at least I'm not weak enough to fall in love with a monster. She stepped closer, her voice a low whisper. Do you really believe Christian loves you? You're his experiment. Isabella, I know because I gave him that assignment. Isabella's breath caught. You're lying. He'll come soon, Victoria murmured. I promise. But when he does, you'll see truth is never kind. Then she was gone, leaving only silence. Outside, the rain hammered the roof fast, uneven, like a breaking heartbeat. Night. Isabella sat alone, pale beneath the flickering light. In her trembling hands was the photograph Christian and Victoria, shaking hands. She no longer knew what was true or false. Only that everything inside her trust, love, hope had shattered like falling glass. A noise came from the door. A shadow appeared. Christian? His coat was soaked, his face tense, eyes darker than the night itself. He looked at her, voice rough with cold and exhaustion. You shouldn't be here. Victoria was just here, she whispered. She said, you used to work for her. He stood motionless. Raindrops slid from his hair to the floor. A long silence. Then, quietly, he nodded. Yes, it's true. She stepped back, as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. So everything between us, it was part of your plan. No, he said quickly. I left her because of you. I betrayed Victoria because I couldn't stand what she was doing turning people into property. He moved closer, eyes desperate. I chose to save you, not out of guilt, but because for the first time, I wanted to do something right. And still, you lied to me. Because I was afraid you'd leave if you knew everything. And you think I'll stay now? Her voice broke, though her tears did not fall. She looked at him, the man who had made her believe, and then destroyed that belief. I don't know whether to hate you or pity you, Christian. He lowered his head, whispering, Don't hate me, just live. I've already lost enough. She turned away and walked toward the door. He didn't stop her. He only watched, eyes wet with rain, face frozen in the dark. Outside, the rain still fell heavy, endless. Isabella walked on, water streaming down her skin, chilling her to the bone. Only one thing remained certain in her heart. If love ever truly existed between them, it was a love born in sin. And the only way to redeem it was through truth. She was no longer afraid. She would find it, even if it meant losing herself again. Late February in New York was blanketed by a thick, gray fog. The rain from the previous night had washed the city clean. Yet inside Isabella, everything remained clouded and chaotic. She had left Washington 2 days earlier, clinging to a fragile belief that somewhere between lies and betrayal, a fragment of truth might still exist enough to hold on to what once was love. She hadn't contacted Christian. She'd left no trace. But she knew he would find her. He always did. Only this time, she wanted to reach the truth before he did. That afternoon, she went to an old building near the docks, once a secondary lab for the Riverside project. Now it was only decaying walls, rusted machinery, and the lingering scent of old chemicals. Walking down the cold hallway, she found a dusty server still faintly humming in the basement. A login prompt blinked on the screen, Aegis Root Access. Beside the keyboard lay an old ID card, Victoria Hale. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. Lines of data flickered onto the screen. Subject 01, failure. Subject 07, deceased. Subject 10, active. Under Subject 10 was something she had never seen before. Authorization, Moretti, override protocol. Project terminated by donor's request. Her heart thudded. Terminated by donor's request. The donor, Christian. He had ordered the entire experiment to end. He had really tried to save her. She stood frozen, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. Relief and heartbreak tangled inside her chest. Everything she thought was deceit, maybe it had been a desperate attempt by a man trying to keep her from being turned into someone's property. I knew you'd come here. The voice behind her made her flinch. Victoria stepped from the shadows, a long coat brushing the floor, her heels clicking against the concrete. She didn't smile, just looked at Isabella, eyes sharp and silver cold. Still as naive as ever, thinking love can change a monster. If he's a monster, Isabella whispered, then you're the one who made him. Victoria's lips curved a short, bitter smile. Christian was never yours. He belonged to me long before you even knew his name. No, Isabella said, steadier this time. He belongs to his own choices, and he chose not to be yours anymore. You think he chose you? Victoria stepped closer, her voice low. He chose the illusion of redemption. You were just the instrument that made him believe he could escape his sins. The words cut deep, but Isabella didn't back away. If you really understood him, you'd know some people would rather live with sin than live without something to love. Victoria stared at her for a long moment. Something fatigue, sorrow, maybe regret flickered behind her icy eyes. Then her voice softened, almost like a confession. You don't understand. Christian once loved me, but he chose betrayal. And traitors, Isabella, don't get to live. A gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet tore into the wall, shattering metal behind Isabella. She stumbled, ears ringing as gun smoke spread through the room. The door burst open. Christian. Light from the hallway hit his face streaked with rain, blood, and despair. Victoria, his voice rasped. Enough. Too late, Christian. You're too late. She raised her gun, but he was faster. 2 shots rang out, echoing as one. Victoria staggered back, her hand loosening. The gun clattered to the floor. She collapsed, eyes wide open, not in hatred, but in fleeting regret. Still weak, as ever, she whispered, and then she was gone. Isabella trembled, tears mixing with the dust and rain as she looked at him. You followed me. I knew you'd come here, he said quietly. I couldn't let them reach you first. He moved closer. His hand shook not from the fight, but from the fear of what he might have lost. You killed her. No, he whispered, shaking his head. She chose her end. I just finished it. She studied him. The fury was gone. What remained was exhaustion, the kind that came when a man had finally reached the end of the darkness. I saw the data, she said softly. You ended the project. You saved me. Christian closed his eyes. I didn't want you to live believing everything between us was born of sin. But it was, she said, her voice trembling. And what makes it real is that even in that darkness, you still chose to love me. He opened his eyes and looked at her. You know, Isabella, the first time I heard our child's heartbeat, I thought maybe God still forgives men like me. Her tears finally fell. God doesn't need to forgive you. Christian, you already did when you chose to save someone else. Outside, the rain poured harder. They stood in the ruined lab, surrounded by the broken remains of the experiment that had destroyed them both. Everything stilled except their breathing, and the gaze they couldn't look away from. Christian stepped forward, stopping in front of her. He reached out, brushing her cheek, his calloused fingers rough but impossibly gentle. I used to think love meant possession, but you taught me. Sometimes love means letting someone be free. She placed his hand over her heart. Freedom doesn't mean walking away. It means staying even when both people know they could leave at any moment. He looked at her for a long time, then leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead, light as a prayer. A week later, news of an explosion at the harbor spread quickly, though no one ever learned the truth. The FBI closed the file. Victoria Hale was declared missing. Christian Moretti vanished from every record. Isabella moved to a quiet suburb outside Chicago, a small house with lavender in the garden and windows facing the morning sun. She worked at a small veterinary clinic, living more peacefully than she ever had before. Each morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, she listened to the soft rhythm inside her belly steady, alive, reminding her that no night lasts forever, and even darkness leads to dawn. One late afternoon, as she cleaned the counter, the clinic door opened. A tall man stepped inside, long coat, faint scent of wood and smoke. She didn't need to look up to know. Christian. He stood at the doorway, the sunset softening his features. No longer the ruthless mafia boss, just a man who had finally learned what love meant. You came to say goodbye, she asked, smiling through glassy eyes. No, he said gently. I came to tell you, I'm still learning to live the way you taught me. He stepped forward, placing a small silver bracelet in her hand, the one he had once put on her wrist in that mansion. Now it was no longer a tracker, just a gift. To remind you wherever I am. I'll know you're safe. She looked at him, eyes shimmering in the fading light. And if one day the child asks about his father? He smiled soft, bittersweet, beautiful. Tell him, he was born from a man who once lost his way, but found the light again because of two things: you and love. Isabella stepped outside, watching his silhouette fade into the sunset. The golden light bathed the street, lavender swayed in the breeze, and for the first time, the world seemed to breathe again. She placed a hand over her belly and whispered to the life within. My child, you don't have to be perfect to deserve love. You only have to be brave enough to give it. Sunlight brushed through her hair, flooding the space before her. Where once there was darkness, now remained only light and peace. A year later, spring had painted Chicago in gold. The towers along Lake Michigan shimmered beneath the morning sun, and the breeze from the water carried the faint scent of lavender, Isabella's favorite fragrance. She stood in the small garden behind her new home, where rows of lavender bloomed in soft violet. The wooden swing by the porch swayed gently with the wind. In her arms, baby Elias slept soundly, his warmth small yet steady, a quiet reminder that every wound could be healed by life itself. It had been 1 year since that fateful rain-soaked night. She hadn't heard from Christian. No one knew where he had gone or if he was still alive. But deep down, she believed that wherever he was, he had chosen to live as he once promised her to live, the way you taught me. In the morning, she went to the veterinary clinic where she worked. Her first client was an old man with a frail dog, its fur almost completely white. As she examined the animal gently, the man smiled kindly. You have such calm hands, doctor, as if you believe everything can come back to life. Isabella smiled faintly and replied, I don't believe in miracles, sir, but I believe in what can still be saved. After work, she stopped by a small charity, the Aegis Foundation, a name she had reclaimed and redefined to protect life, not to control it. There, she helped women who had been victims of illegal biomedical experiments. They planted flowers, painted, and slowly learned how to begin again. One afternoon, a young woman came to apply for a position, thin, quiet, with tired but hopeful eyes. I heard you're a survivor of Riverside. Is that true? Yes, Isabella answered softly. And that's why I want to turn the past into something that can help others. That night, Elias slept peacefully in his crib. Isabella sat on the porch. Opening a small silver box inside lay an old bracelet, scratched and faded. Once it had been a tracking device. Now it was only a keepsake. She held it in her palm, fingers tracing it as if touching memory itself, the cold winds of Montreal. The first time she heard her child's heartbeat. The look in a man's eyes as he said, I'd burn the world to find you. She had never forgotten. No one forgets the person who both saved and shattered them. The wind stirred the curtain. A letter slipped through the door, no name, no address. Only a small wax seal shaped like 2 interlocking circles, the old emblem of Aegis. She unfolded it. Inside was a short handwritten note in a familiar slanted script. Don't fear the dark. It exists only to prove that light is still somewhere near. Thank you for helping me believe that again. C.M. The paper was creased, faintly smelling of gunpowder and wood smoke. Her hands trembled as her eyes blurred with tears. No signature was needed. He was alive. That summer, the Aegis Foundation opened its first community center, a place for those once called failures of science to find belonging again. The inauguration was quiet, with no press or spectacle. Only smiles and sunlight. Isabella stepped onto the small stage, holding Elias in her arms. The light fell across her hair, warm and golden. I was once the victim of a mistake, she began, her voice calm but strong. But today, I stand here to say mistakes don't define us. The way we choose to live afterward, that's what does. The audience fell silent. Some bowed their heads. Others wept softly. At the back of the hall, a figure stood motionless tall, in a black coat, hat shadowing half his face. He didn't come forward, didn't speak. But when their eyes met, Isabella's heart trembled. Even for just a moment, she knew. He had come back. After the ceremony, when everyone had left, she went to the garden. The sunset poured gold over the rows of lavender. On the wooden table lay a photograph, her and Elias in the garden, taken from afar. On the back, a single line. I never left. I just stayed where I could still see you happy. She smiled through tears. The wind carried the scent of lavender, a gentle goodbye. She looked up, watching the sun dip below the lake's horizon. That night, as Elias stirred in his sleep, she sang softly the same Italian song Christian once heard her sing in that bar so long ago. Her voice was tender, hushed, like a whisper to the stars. Quando la notte finisce, tornerà la luce. When the night ends, the light will return. Outside, in a narrow alley, a man stood silently. He looked up toward the window, where her voice floated out fragile, steady, and beautiful enough to make the world pause. He lit a cigarette. The smoke curled into the night air. His eyes no longer carried the weight of a sinner, only the quiet of a man living to keep one final promise. "You were right, Isabella," he murmured. "The light is still here in you, in him, in everything I never had the courage to make right." He turned and walked away, his steps fading into the night, leaving behind only the faint trace of smoke and lavender. A bittersweet harmony marking the end of two lost souls who had finally found their way home. The next morning, the sun rose earlier than usual. Light streamed through the window, warming Isabella's face. Elias opened his eyes pale blue, reflecting the sky. She smiled and whispered, "Good morning, my son." The world is still beautiful even after the darkness. Outside, Lake Michigan shimmered gold. A lone bird glided across the sky, dropping a single feather onto the water weightless as memory, but lasting as love. And in the wind, it almost sounded like a distant voice. "I've found my dawn. It's you." She closed her eyes, smiling softly. Every pain, every loss, every lie had become light. The past couldn't be erased, but they had found a way to rewrite the ending. And they had done it together. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.